Welcome back to the Hall of History with our look at the Watergate scandal. Technically not in the 60s, but we're going to put it in this unit as a continuation of the late 60s and into the early 70s. Uh, with many scandals or actions by anybody, it's not so much the action itself that gets them in trouble, but the cover up afterwards. And this definitely was the case with Richard Milhouse Nixon at the time. Well, what ended up happening? The Watergate Hotel, if you remember from the Forrest Gump movie, Forrest saw the break-in from his room and called the police. Well, actually, what ended up happening that one of the security guards saw some tape on a door on the lock and checked into it, and they found that some men broke into the Democratic National Committee in the Watergate apartment complex. Nothing big out of that until it was discovered that one of the men that did the break-in was a former CIA agent. Well, as with so many different things, the scandal really begins when you start to try to cover it up. And you can, and here it says the attempt to assure Nixon's reelection again in 1972. He was at this time he was a fairly popular president. Vietnam War was winding down. He opened up diplomatic and economic relations with the Chinese, and he probably would have gotten reelected, but this whole scandal started to break out. And what he was trying to do was to see if they could get any information on the Democratic person who was going to run against him at this time. Well, the cover up as it went into they started looking back, and the trail went all the way back to the White House. And Nixon, which was his undoing here, he ordered the CIA to stop the FBI from investigating, claiming that it threatened national security. Well, that just didn't hold water very well, and everything really broke loose after that. Well, the burglars were put on trial in '73, and they implicate Nixon in the White House. Of course, you always have your Senate investigations, and the Senate investigated the claims, and learned that Nixon also had a secret tape recording system installed in the White House to record all the conversations at the time. And so this became a whole nother issue unto itself. And the Senate committee wanted to hear the tapes. Well, Nixon refused to claim or refused to turn the tapes over, claiming executive privilege, again, national security reasons, which really this had nothing to do with national security. Uh, it was interesting. He turned this issue to Nixon's VP, Spiro Agnew. He was forced to resign for taking bribes while he was the governor of Maryland. Well, as Nixon or Agnew resigned, Gerald R. Ford, who was a very conservative and well thought of member of the House of Representatives, was asked to become a vice president. Well, Nixon eventually was forced to turn over the tapes because of the Supreme Court ruling. And as the tapes so showed, that Nixon had ordered the CIA to stop the investigation only a few days after the break-in. With this news, it was pretty obvious that Nixon would be impeached by the House and removed from the being president of the United States. And probably one of the more famous pictures at this time when Nixon resigned in 1974 was Nixon boarding one of the presidential helicopters at the time. Well, what happened here was we had our first non-elected president of the United States, and that was Gerald R. Ford. It was also interesting to note at this time this was the Woodward and Bernstein, the reporters for the I believe it was the Washington Times, were on the investigative trail. This this time period really set forth the mistrust in our government. There were other dubious going on things years, the previous years up to this time, but now it made the national headlines. They got, somebody got caught, the president covered it up, and it really became a national disgrace. And it took a long time for this really to heal at the time. I remember we were still just winding down the Vietnam War. We still had the civil rights movement was going on at the time. Uh, we were just a few years really off the JFK assassination in Dallas, Texas, and the countercultural movement was probably at its peak at this time also, as we learned from Woodstock. So there was a lot of things that was really ripping the country apart. One thing Ford did do, he did bring some stability back to the country. He was well thought of on both sides of the political aisle, and he pretty much settled the country down a bit. He definitely, a lot of discussion made about, because he ended up pardoning Nixon, which for his crimes, which a president could do. He did not feel it was in the country's best interest to put a former sitting president on trial, and so he pardoned him. And he took a lot of flack for that. May have cost him his own election for the presidency on the next cycle, but he did what he thought was right, and that's, and history will judge if he was right with his decision or not. So that's our short look at the Watergate scandal. Again, I would suggest, if you're so interested, make some fascinating reading. There were movies about the era. A lot of interesting characters at this time, both inside and outside the White House. A lot of conspiracy plots going on and everything. So, again, if you're interested, I would recommend that you investigate this time period in American history. And that's it for today.